let's start with section 1. Section 1, that is general aptitude. It is common across all GATE papers. Typically, it has 10 questions, out of which 1 to 5 are 1 mark questions, and 6 to 10th question, they are 2 mark questions, giving a total of 15 marks. So, general aptitude generally has various broad categories like verbal ability, logical reasoning, spatial aptitude, quantitative aptitude, analytical reasoning. So, what we have tried here is to categorize each question into its section and the chapter that it has been taken from, so that the students can also get a broad idea and can do self analysis of what kind of questions are coming from each and every section. Let's move on to question number 1. This question is from verbal ability and it is from collective nouns. So, an analogy is given. If fish is to shoal, then lion is to what? So, these are the list of collective nouns, as you can see, which are typically for the group of animals. So, we have heard of these nouns, like for example, a herd of cattle, a pack of wolves, a pride of lions, a pod of dolphins. So accordingly, for fish, we have shoal. So then for lion, what would be the appropriate collective noun? So the options are pride, school, forest, and series. Just by looking at the option, we know it is A, pride. Since we can also try and guess the collective noun as per the kind of familiarity we have with that particular animal. So for example, if we see lions are considered as the king of the jungle, right? So if you see, they are already treated as a noble or a very regal animal, so therefore it is the term associated with that regality is definitely going to be pride. No, school is again a term which is used for fish. Forest and series would seem a bit absurd in context of lion. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 2 is again from verbal ability, and it says, identify the grammatically correct sentence. So there are 4 sentences that have been given here. Let's look at them one by one. Option number A says, it is I who am responsible for this fiasco. B, it is myself who is responsible for this fiasco. C, it is I who is responsible for this fiasco. And D, it is I who are responsible for this fiasco. So this is again from subject verb agreement, if you see, and I is referred to as the subject, right? So the basic logic is, with I, to satisfy the subject verb agreement, we always use am. Right. So even if you think of a sentence like, for example, I am going to the market. Right. So am is always associated with I. So just looking at the options, option A would be the correct one. Right. If you see myself in option B, generally we don't use myself. Like it is not grammatically correct to use myself in a sentence to introduce the first person subject. Okay, so this would be wrong. It is I who is responsible for this fiasco is same as saying I is going to the market, which is again absurd. And it is I who are responsible for this fiasco, again, which is not correct. The correct answer is, it is I who am responsible for this fiasco. Again, in verbal ability, we look at a lot of logical thinking and logical conceptual based questions. Again, it is something that we have done from our school and college time. So it is nothing that you have to be afraid about. Let's jump to the next question. The question number 3 is the first question that we have from Quantitative Aptitude, and the chapter is direction, speed, distance, and time, which is a very important chapter because frequently they have been asking questions from this particular section. Okay, so the question 3 says, 2 cars P and Q start from a point X in India at 10 a.m. So with direction, speed, distance, and time, it is very helpful that we visualize the entire problem. प्रॉब्लम को आपको विजुअलाइज करना आना चाहिए, सो दैट इट इज वेरी इजी टू सॉल्व And such large questions, if you see it in a one go, it might seem intimidating, but if you break it down, अगर आप उसको visualize करोगे, तो it will be easier to solve. So let's visualize it. Two cars P and Q start from point X in India at 10 a.m. Okay, so there's a reference point. Two cars P and Q are starting from this point at time, let's call it T1, 10 a.m. Right? Car P travels north with speed of 25 km/h. So let's set our reference plane. Let this be north. So this is naturally east, south, and west. So now car P is traveling, say, in this direction with speed. So let it be SP is equals to 25 km/h. And Q travels east with a speed of 30 km/h. Okay, so Q is going to go somewhere here. So SQ is 30 km/h, right? If car P travels continuously but car Q stops for some time after traveling for 1 hour, if both the cars are at the same distance from X, very important word, same distance from X at 11:30 a.m. For how long in minutes did the car Q stop? What they have given is at T2, which is 11:30 a.m., Px is equals to Qx. So your distances are equal, right? Now we have a very elementary formula that we have also done in our school times. Speed is equals to distance upon time, right? This is a formula that we have done in our school times also. So if you simplify, distance d is equals to speed into time. Why are we doing it in form of distance? Because distances are equal, right? If the distance is equal, we can equate P ka distance and Q ka distance to get the value of time. So let's say for P, for car P, dP would be what? It would be SP into TP would be the same, right? Because it took T2, it would be T2 minus T1, right? So it would be 11:30 minus 10, which would be 1.5 hours. Mind you, this entire calculation has been done in hours because we have been given speed in hours. But they have been asking us in minutes. So don't forget to convert the hour form into minutes later. SP is 25 and this is 1.5. 25 into 1.5 will give us 37.5 kilometers, right? So let this be equation 1. Now if you see, I'll go to the next page. Yes. So now if you see, for let's say Q, your dq is nothing but SQ into TQ, right? Time taken by T. But now, say for time, since it has taken a halt, we know the total time is 1.5 hours either way, right? Say X is the component for which halt was taken and Y is the component for which the car was moving. For distance to be calculated, we need the time for which the car was moving, right? With a constant speed. So Y can be written as 1.5 minus X. So this would be 30 into 1.5 minus X, right? So this is the value of dq. Now we know it is given that dp is equals to dq. Therefore, what was dp? It was 37.5 would be equal to 30 into 1.5 minus x, right? Now 37.5 would remain as is. This would become 30 into 1.5, which is 45 minus 30x. Therefore, if you take this here, 30x is equals to 7.5. X is equals to 7.5 upon 30. So, which is nothing but can be reduced into 7.5 into 2 is 15. 15 2s are 30. So, 1 by 4. which is 0.25 hours. This is the answer, but the options are in minutes. So we know 1 hour is equals to 60 minutes, right? Therefore, 1/4 of an hour will be 60 by 4, which is equals to 15 minutes. So the correct option here is C. Again, the concepts and logic are quite elementary in nature. It is just like you have to be calm during the exam, practice more questions, and you can easily solve these questions. Let's move on to the next question. Next 1 mark question is our question number 4, which is again from Quantitative Aptitude, and the chapter is functions. So in this chapter, actually, there are multiple functions that we have studied in our high school. So it is a mix of such questions. This question is particularly interesting. Let's see why. The ceiling function of a real number x, denoted by CEX, is defined as the smallest integer that is greater than or equal to x. Similarly, the floor function, denoted by FL of x, is defined as the largest integer that is smaller than or equal to x. Which one of the following statements is not correct for all possible values of x? So to understand this, we need to understand what is a ceiling function and a floor function. So just by the words, if you see, for example, if this is your number, say p, then you can try to visualize what would be the ceiling. For example, I draw a line above, I draw a line below. So you can refer to this as ceiling because it is above, and floor because it is below, right? In a normal space. So now, in two scenarios, for example, let's take a rational number 3.6. So the ceiling function for 3.6 would be the smallest integer that is greater than or equal to x. Integer that is greater than or equal to x. 3.6 is a rational number, so you have to take the next integer, which would be 4. So 4 is your ceiling function for 3.6. Now, if we see the floor function, it is the largest integer that is smaller than or equal to x. Again, 3.6 is a rational number, so the next integer which is smaller than 3.6 would be 3. Right? So for 3.6, 4 is the ceiling function, while 3 is the floor function. Similarly, there's case 2. For example, if your number, your x value is 3, it's an integer itself, then what is the ceiling function and what is the floor function? Now, if you see the definition, it is greater than or equal to x, right? Smaller than or equal to x. So simply this would be 3 and 3. So this is the concept of ceiling and floor functions. Now let's have a look at all these options to check which of them is not correct. That would be our answer. Let's say option A, they have given ceiling function of x is greater than or equal to x. So this is the same thing that they have been providing us in the question itself, right? So if you see, ceiling function is that integer greater than or equal to x. So this is definitely a true statement, right? So this is not the correct option that we are looking for. If you see in these two analogies, ceiling function 4 is greater than 3.6, or 3 which is equal to 3 also. So this is correct. So conversely, floor function of x is less than or equal to x, which is again a true statement, right? Because it is given in the question. If you see, 3 is less than 3.6, and 3, which is the floor function, is equal to 3 also. So this is also a correct statement. So this is not our option. C is, let's try C. Ceiling function of x is greater than or equal to floor function of x. So now, if you see by the innate property from equation A and B, we can write it as ceiling of x is greater than equal to x is less than or equal to FL of x. So naturally, if I just solve this, I'll get ceiling of x is greater than or equal to floor of x, which is true. In this question, the floor function is lesser, the ceiling function is greater than the floor function, and in this example, the ceiling function is equal to floor function. So again, this is a true property. So option C is not correct. Option number D, ये last वाला option है. Now if you see in this, let's write it here. They have given कि floor function है जो अपना is less than ceiling function. So see, this is a confusing property because if you see generally, 4 and 3 are the functions, right? So 3 is definitely less than 4. But you can't forget that for integers, ceiling and floor function can be same, right? So this is not necessarily true. Hence, this is the correct answer. So you have to carefully read the question and deduce logically. Okay. Let's move on to next question. Question number 5 is a 1 mark question, again from quantitative aptitude, and the chapter is probability. Probability, permutation, combinations, both of the chapters are extremely important. Frequently, they have been asking questions in quantitative aptitude from probability and permutation combinations. Okay, so let's have a look at this question. P and Q play chess frequently against each other. Of these matches, P has won 80% of the matches, drawn 15% of the matches, and lost 5% of the matches. Okay, so let's just try and break down this particular part where we have been given the probabilities of P either winning, losing, or drawing the match. Okay, so probability of P winning is 80%, which can be written as 80 upon 100, which can be written as 4 by 5. Probability of P drawing is given as 15%. तो 15% कैसे लिख सकते हैं? 15, any percent is per centum or per 100, right? So it is 15 upon 100, which can be written as 5 3s are and 5 20s are. So 3 by 20. Probability of P losing would be 5%. Again, if अगर वो लोग ने क्वेश्चन में ये 5% नहीं दिया होता, then you could have easily subtracted it from 100%, because we know your probability, the sum of all your probabilities has to be 1 or 100%, right? And probability, a very important concept, I would say, your probability P will always lie between 0 and 1. This is a very important property, very fundamental, but you have to remember this. 5% तो क्या हो गया? 5 upon 100, right? Which I can write as 1 by 20. Correct. So अपने को probabilities मिल गया. We have written it down, so we know. Now let's see what they have asked next. If they play 3 more matches, what is the probability of P winning exactly 2 of these 3 matches? ठीक है. So now they are playing 3 more matches. Okay, so let's try and visualize what can be the scenes. So let's write match 1, match 2, and match 3. How can P in the third match not to win? There are two either possibilities, right? Either the match gets drawn or the match is lost, right? So let's make first column, which is drawn. Say third match draw हो गया, तो naturally you would write first match win हो गया, second match win हो गया, third match draw हो गया, and we'll find the probability by multiplying the probabilities. But is this the only way? If there are 3 matches, then there are 3 more possibilities or 3 more cases, right? 3 more combinations in which P can draw a match or P can win a match, right? So WWD is one of the possibilities. It can also be win, draw, and win. It can also be draw, win, and win. Probability either way is the same because you have to multiply, but we have to multiply the individual probability by 3. Okay. Second one is loss. अभी loss हो गया concept. So again the same logic. If it can be W, W, L, right? This is one of the case, but it can occur in multiple possibilities, which is W, L, W, and L, W, W. Right? So again, you have to just find this probability and multiply it by 3. So, and if you add this plus this, drawn plus lost, you will get the total probability. So let's go to the calculation part now. Say for case 1, which is your draw, and case 2, which is your loss. So probability of P drawing one of the 3 matches would be 4 by 5 into 4 by 5 into 3 by 20, which is WWD. You can easily calculate this. 4 by 4, 16, 16 by 3, 48, 40, Hmm. 4 by 4 is 16. 16 by into 3 is 48. 5 by 20 is 100. 100 into 5 is 500. Don't forget to multiply this later by 3. 48 threes would be 144 upon 500. So this is total probability of P drawing the match in one of the matches out of 3. Then next would be the loss case, right? So probability of P losing one of the match, which is winning 2 of the either 3 matches. Okay. So this will be WWL 4 by 5 into 4 by 5 into 1 by 20. This will give us 4, 4, 16, 16 upon 500. Again, don't forget to multiply by 3. This would be 48 upon 500. So my final probability is 144 upon 500 plus 48 upon 500, which will give me 192 upon 500. We don't have 192 by 500, so we'll have to start reducing. Let's divide it by 2. 96. 500 is 250. Again by 2. 96, 48. 125. I think we have this option, which is option number A. So the probability of P winning exactly 2 of these 3 matches is 48 by 125. Again, it is quite lengthy, I would say, but completely based on logical and conceptual clarity. So practice is the key, and concept clarity is also the key. This can also be solved using binomial probability theorem. But personally, I would advise to not go into depths of formula or mugging of formulas for solving a question. It is always easier and it is always going to be helpful if you understand the questions and solve them accordingly. Even if you do this, it will help you in your NAT section also, in your architecture, planning, or common part. Okay. So we have finished all the 1 mark questions. Now let's go on to the 2 mark questions. Question 6 is from verbal ability, chapter English composition comprehension. Okay. Identify option that has been most appropriate sequence such that a coherent paragraph is formed. So they have given us 4 PQRS statements, and we have to arrange it in a way that a coherent paragraph is formed. Let's read it once. Statement P says, at once, without thinking much, people rushed towards the city in hordes with the sole aim of grabbing as much gold as they could. Okay. However, little did they realize about the impending hardships they would have to face on their way to the city. Miles of mud, unfriendly forests, hungry beasts, and inimical local lords, all of which would reduce their chances of getting gold to almost zero. Statement R. All of them thought that easily they could lay their hands on gold and become wealthy overnight. Statement S. About 100 years ago, the news that gold had been discovered in Kolar spread like wildfire, and whole state was in raptures. Just by seeing this, and just by our previous understanding, S would be definitely the starting sentence, because we start a paragraph. If we have to narrate a story, we always start with once upon a time ago, or since ages, or something which relates to time, right? So S is definitely the starting point. So ultimately your option A and B are cancelled because S is not starting. So option C and D, either of option C and D can be correct because S is the starting statement. So let's check option C now. SQ. However, little did they realize about the impending hardships they would have to face on their way to the city. Okay. Statement P. At once, without thinking, people rushed towards the city in hordes with sole aim of grabbing as much gold as they could. So if you see in this particular SQPR analogy, after S, there is no sequence or context which has been followed in the statements. Like for example, I'll show you. If it is Q, little did they realize about the impending hardship they would have to face on their way to the cities. right? And all of which would reduce the chances of getting gold to almost zero. Now, nothing has been mentioned about the citizens wanting to get gold, right? In either of the previous sentences. So the statement S and Q have very little to no relationship. Similarly, you can check it for Q and P and P and R also. So naturally, option D would be the correct one. So if you check SPRQ, SPRQ would be about 100 years ago, as we know. P is at once, without thinking much, people rush towards the cities in whole because uh, gold had been discovered in Kolar, spread like wildfire. So ultimately, spread like wildfire हुआ. तो क्या किया? Without thinking much, people rush towards the city in hordes. So this is a link, right? Gold मिला, gold को ढूंढने लोग गए. Then R. All of them thought that easily they could lay their hands on the gold. Again, gold के ख्वाब से उन लोग को लगा कि अरे ये तो बहुत easy काम है. But little did they know. So however, your conditional sentence. So what is the condition? However, little did they realize about the impending hardships. So this is definitely the last statement. So correct answer would be D, SPRQ. Again, very logical based question, logic based question. So it can be solved easily. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 7 is from section logical reasoning and the chapter is coding decoding. Okay. So in coding decoding, generally the letters can be coded as numbers. Numbers can be coded as letters. There can be special symbols like dollar symbols or asterisk symbols which can be coded, and you have to decode the code, or from the code which is given you have to find the original word or the original code that was there, right? So in this question, if hide and cage are coded as follows. So hide, let's write it down. Hide is coded as 19, 23, 7, 11. And cage is coded as 5, 2, 17, 11. What is the code for high? So actually, if you see these two words, you can easily see all these letters H, I, G and H are present in these two words, right? So you can naturally just copy the numbers which are associated with the letters. So H का 19 है, so 19 आ जाएगा. I का 23 है, so 23 आ जाएगा. G का 17 है, तो 17 आ जाएगा. H का वापस 19 है, so 19 आ जाएगा. So the correct answer would be D, looking at the options. But there are high chances later in any further exams or previous year questions that there might be a letter extra in the question which is not there in your statements. तो कैसा हो जाएगा? For example, हाई में तो सब है, but अगर आपको पूछ लिया केक का कोडिंग करो, तो केक का सी ए और ई तो है केक से, बट के तो नहीं था, तो के आप कैसे ढूंढोगे? How will you find K? Therefore, you have to start understanding how are these letters, ये letters कैसे related है एक दूसरे को. So just by seeing you can see 19, 23, 7, 11, 5, 2, 17, 11. पहले दिमाग में आते हैं अरे ये सब तो odd number है. Then you see 2. 2 is not an odd number. So what else can be the grouping? Again, this is fairly simple. All of these are prime numbers. Prime numbers are the numbers that have only two factors. One which is 1. And second is the number itself. So 1, or say if you consider 19, then 1 and 19 are the only two factors that will satisfy that prime number, right? So if you look for cage, अगर आप देखोगे A को 2 दिया है, right? So 2 is the first prime number, A is the first letter. So naturally if I write A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I start writing prime numbers in sequence. So 2, 3, 5, 7, 9 is not a prime number, so 11, 13, 15 is not a prime number, so 17, and so on, right? So can I just verify these numbers? C का 5 है, yes. E का 11 है, yes. F का 13 है, F is not given. G का 17 है, yes. So this is the series, or this is the sequence that we have to follow to decode the following code, right? So इसमें तो क्या था, दिया है directly, so no need to do all these steps. But in case ये नहीं दिया होता, अगर कोई new letter आ जाता है जो आपके earlier codes में नहीं है, so then you have to start solving that puzzle or solving the sequence, right? So fairly simple for 2 marks. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 8 is a 2-mark question from Spatial Aptitudes. Okay, स्पेशल एप्टीट्यूड में से है एंड द चैप्टर इज मिरर एंड वाटर इमेजेस. सो बेसिकली एक इमेज होता है, उसको रिफ्लेक्ट करते हैं अक्रॉस वर्टिकल एंड हॉरिजॉन्टल प्लेन. देन यू कैन perform operations like rotating it, mirroring it, then rotating anti-clockwise by this degrees, rotating clockwise by this degrees. Something that we have already done in our undergraduate competitive exams. Just to clear and have basic ideas, a mirror image is nothing but reflected across the side axis, right? While a water image is reflected across a horizontal. So this would be vertical axis to be very clear, and this would be reflected around a horizontal axis, right? So if this is the question here, then its water image would be this. This is a mirror image, and this is a water image, right? Let's look at the question. The given figure is reflected about the horizontal dashed line and then rotated clockwise by 90 about an axis perpendicular to plane of the figure. Which one of the following options correctly shows the resultant figure? Figures shown are represented. Okay. So this is our problem figure. If you see horizontally reflect किया है, मतलब क्या? Water image निकाला है. So if you reflect it horizontally, you will see this is the figure that we get. In the exam paper or during the exam, what you can try and do, pick a particular object and just solve it for that particular object. So for example, if we pick a moon, right? तो चलो moon ले लेते हैं. If this is my moon, right? And if this is my horizontal line. So I know my moon, since it is symmetrical, it would almost be the same, right? ये ऐसा हो जाएगा. मतलब क्या, अगर मैं वाटर इमेज और मेरी इमेज को एक के ऊपर एक रखता हूं, देन दे शुड कोइंसाइड विद ईच अदर. सेम इज विद मिरर. मिरर एक के ऊपर नहीं, साइड बाय साइड रखता हूं, सो दे शुड ओवरलैप विद ईच अदर, राइट? अभी इसको, अगर ये मून को मैंने 90 डिग्रीज क्लॉकवाइज घुमाया, क्लॉकवाइज मतलब क्या, लाइक दिस, राइट? क्लॉक का हाथ कैसे घूमता है? क्लॉकवाइज. तो इफ यू सी, इफ आई रोटेट दिस बाय 90 डिग्रीज, so this will nothing, in 90 degrees clockwise it will be nothing but this, right? So this is something that I have to now look in my answer options. A में तो नहीं है, so definitely not the answer. B में है, can be an answer. C में भी नहीं है, D में भी नहीं. So easily you could take option B. अभी ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि दो ऑप्शन में आपको मून ऐसा मिल जाए, प्रॉब्लम फिगर जैसा. तो फिर आप दूसरा सिंबल लेके you can start doing the same process. For example, you can take this particular figure. So if you see, if it is reflected, and if you just try and visualize it, they will overlap, right? And then if you rotate it by 90 degrees, this is the correct figure, right? So this was the solution. Option B is the correct answer. Let's move to question number 9. Again, it is from section Spatial Aptitude itself, and the chapter is Symmetrical and Asymmetrical Figures. The chapter is Symmetrical and Asymmetrical Figures. Which one of the following options has the correct sequence of objects arranged in the increasing number of mirror lines or lines of symmetry? Again, mirror line जब हमने discuss किया था, what was it? कि एक axis है, if you reflect it, you'll get a similar an image which is exactly the same, right? Exactly the same without any distortion to your parent image. So वही क्या है? Lines of symmetry. We know symmetrical figures क्या होता है कि एक axis है, उससे अगर आप वो figure को ये कर, for example this is the figure and you have a symmetry का axis, then the next figure, if it is a symmetrical figure, it would be exactly the same. Only then it is symmetrical. Asymmetrical में वो अलग हो जाएगा. Fairly simple concept. Yeah, let's try to solve this. So ऑप्शन में क्या क्या दिया है? सर्कल दिया है, स्क्वायर दिया है, इक्विलैटरल ट्रायंगल दिया है, आइसोसेलेस ट्रायंगल दिया है. तो सर्कल के साथ स्टार्ट करते हैं. If you see by definition of circle, what is the definition of circle? Circle is a locus of points which are equidistant from the center, right? मतलब क्या, सर्कल का रेडियस सेम होता है. नाउ यू नो अ सर्कल विल हैव इनफाइनाइट पॉइंट्स, infinite set of points. That means I can draw infinite diameters, right, passing through the center, क्योंकि infinite points है. So the lines of symmetry for a circle would be infinite. So actually ये लास्ट में आना चाहिए, सर्कल का ऑप्शन लास्ट में आना चाहिए. ये ऑप्शन पहले से ही गलत है. सर्कल सर्कल सर्कल, सो इट इज ईदर ऑफ बी, सी और डी. सेकेंड is square. Square is a quadrilateral. Square is a quadrilateral whose sides are congruent and angle between the sides is 90 degree. So naturally this one axis is there, this another axis is there. Don't forget the diagonals. दो right angle triangles बन जाएंगे. Yeah, pardon this line. So these are our lines of symmetry, which is 4 lines. So infinite 4. ठीक है, अभी triangle का देखते हैं. Equilateral triangle. Equilateral triangle is a triangle whose sides are congruent to each other, right? इसका भी एक ऐसा आ जाएगा, एक ऐसा आ जाएगा, एक ऐसा आ जाएगा, right? So we all know the center, the ortho center, the in center for equilateral triangle is the same. मतलब क्या, उसका perpendicular bisectors, उसका altitudes, उसका angle bisectors का common point एक ही होता है. So that's why there are 3 lines of symmetry. And if you look at an isosceles triangle only has 2 congruent sides, right? And the base is different. So it can only be reflected along this one plane. क्योंकि अगर मैंने ऐसे रिफ्लेक्ट करने को उसको ट्राई किया तो ये base is not equal to this side, so it won't be symmetrical. So this has one line of symmetry. So our correct option would ideally be isosceles triangle, then equilateral triangle, then square, and then a circle, which is option B. So option B is the correct answer. Let's move on to the final question of quantitative aptitude, of general aptitude. It is from quantitative aptitude. Again, chapter is probability. So a very important question. It has been asked for 3 marks in total. One that we have done previously and 2 here. Total weightage of 20% of the general aptitude section. So quite important. So I would actually suggest you to practice probability, permutation, combinations, and elementary mathematics a lot, because it will eventually help you in solving NET questions in common part as well as B1, B2 part. Okay. Let's move on to this final question. Question number 10. A final year student appears for placement interview in 2 companies, S and T. Based on her interview performance, she estimates the probability of receiving job offers from company S and T to be 0.8 and 0.6 respectively. Let P be the probability that she receives job offers from both the companies. Select the most appropriate option. Okay. So we have to find the range for P, which is nothing but her receiving job offers from both the companies. So let's simplify this a bit first. पहले क्या बोला है? Probability of her getting a job in company S is 0.8, right? Probability of her getting a job in company T is 0.6. Correct? Abhi two or I'd say the most fundamental thing that मैंने पहले भी mention किया था, probability will always lie between 0 to 1, right? Or 0 to 100%. So this is the important property that you have to keep in mind. They have asked P be the probability that she receives job offers from both the company. That is what P S intersection T, right? Set theory, basic set theory. तो ये कौन से रेंज में लाई करता है? So first we can solve this by probability theory. Probability theory. And second, we will solve by a logical method also if you don't know probability theory. तो probability theory में क्या है? Always your S intersection T will be less than or equal to minimum of your individual samples, that is P, S and P, T. So P, S intersection T, what is the minimum of probability S and probability T? It is 0.6, right? You have gotten the upper range. Upper range मिलेगा आपको. Next question is the lower range, right? So now you know from addition theorem, P of S union T, P of S union T is greater than or equal to P of S plus P of T minus P of S intersection T, right? P of S union T has to be 1. So 1 is greater than or equal to 0.8 plus 0.6 minus P S intersection T. So if you just solve this and take solve this inequality, 0.8, so P of S intersection T is greater than or equal to 1.4 minus 1, which is greater than equal to 0.4. So you have gotten your range. I can write this as 0.4 P is greater than or equal to or less than or equal to 0.6, which is option B. So option B is the correct option or the correct solution for the question. Again, अभी इसमें क्या है, मैं आपको एक लॉजिकल वे भी दिखा देता हूँ कि अगर आपको ये नहीं आता रेंज ढूंढना, and you just know the addition theorem. Addition theorem अपना क्या था? Let me just grab the eraser. I'll just annotate it here. ठीक है, अभी this is method 2. This is by pure logic. Probability आपको पता है always will lie between 0 and 1 or is equal to 0 and 1. ठीक है, अगर हम लॉजिक लगाने जाए, राइट, एडिशन थ्योरम से अपने को पता है S union T is equals to this is the theorem that we have already done in our set theory, and इसमें inequality नहीं है, so it is easier to understand because there is no inequality. Often students confuse or get confused by inequality signs. So इसमें equal sign है, right? So I know 1 is equals to 0.8 plus 0.6 minus your P. So now if you see P का वैल्यू अगर आप ऐसे ढूंढोगे तो P is equals to 0.4 आ जाएगा आपको, और अगर आप ऑप्शंस देखने जाओगे तो ऑप्शन ए P is lying between 0 and 0.2, which is not the correct answer, right? B में it can be equal to 0.4, so this is a probable contestant which can be a right option. C may be 0.2, P lies between 0.2 and 0.4, so again this can be a contestant, and D may it is not lying in the range, so again this is not the option. Now between these two, how do you select which one is the option? So if you see, अपन ले लेते हैं कि P is between 0.4 and 0.6, so let's consider P is equals to 0.5 in this case, and let's consider P is equals to 0.3 in this case. अगर मैं ये करता हूं तो मुझे इक्वेशन क्या मिलेगा? 1 is equals to 0.8 plus 0.6 minus 0.3 if I take option C, which is 1.1. Can probability ever be 1.1? No, right? So by taking 0.3, I'm contradicting the entire theorem, right? So naturally P cannot be in this range, and the correct option is B. क्योंकि क्या है, अगर 0.4 से 0.5 भी ले लिया तो probability will still be under the range of 0 to 1, right? So this is a logical deduction of the same question. With this, we have finished our general aptitude part. Now in the next video, we'll be starting with common part, which is common for architecture and planning candidates. It has total of 39 questions, mix of NAT, MCQ and MSQ. So stay tuned, watch the next video. If you really like this video and found it helpful, please share with the students or friends that you know who are appearing for GATE exam or keen about learning for GATE exam. And till then, I'll see you. Bye.